The wound never healed. Frodo Baggins saved Middle-earth at 53, but it killed him anyway. Behind him, the Grey Havens vanished. Ahead lay the part no song would ever tell. What happens when victory breaks you beyond repair? Victory has a cost that does not appear in songs. Frodo returned to the Shire a hero few truly understood. The wound from the Morgul-blade had never fully closed, and the memory of the ring's weight, not just its burden, but the slow pressure of its will against his own remained. It lingered in ways he could not explain to Sam, or Merry, or anyone who had not carried it themselves. Tolkien wrote that Frodo was too deeply hurt to remain in Middle-earth. He meant this quite literally. Some injuries do not belong to the body alone. The ring had marked Frodo in ways time could not undo, and no matter how green the Shire became, it could not restore what had been taken from him. So, passage west was permitted, not as a reward, but as an act of mercy. It was allowed that the ring-bearers might sail to the undying lands by grace rather than by right. Not as an escape from the world, but because healing of this kind could be found nowhere else. To understand where Frodo went, it helps to understand what the undying lands are and what they are not. Aemon, the land of the Valar, was once part of the physical world, but after the downfall of Númenor in the Second Age, when mortal men sailed west in an attempt to claim immortality, Eru Ilúvatar intervened. The shape of the world was changed. Arda, once flat, was bent, and Amon was removed from the circles of the world. From that moment on, ships sailing west would only follow the curve of the sea. There was no western shore, except for the elves. The ships built by Círdan the shipwright at the Grey Havens followed what Tolkien called the straight road, a path that did not obey the world's curvature. To those watching from the shore, these ships did not sink below the horizon. They faded, growing dimmer until they were gone. Frodo did not sail toward another country. He left the physical world behind. When Frodo arrived, he did not set foot in Valinor itself. Mortals, even those granted passage, were not meant to dwell on the mainland of Aman. Frodo and Bilbo instead remained on Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle just off the coast. This was no lesser place. Tol Eressëa had been the first home of the elves, who departed Middle-earth long ago. It was a land untouched by the marring of Arda. The corruption Morgoth had woven into the substance of the world during the ancient wars. Here, Frodo could find rest, not because time ceased, and not because all pain vanished, but because healing was possible. In a way it had never been in Middle-earth, the burden he carried could finally begin to loosen its hold. Gandalf remained with him for a time. So did Bilbo, though Bilbo was already 131 years old. When they sailed, his long life was drawing toward its natural end. Tolkien described Frodo's time in the West as a purgatory and a reward, a period of reflection and understanding, not meant to erase memory, but to bring clarity that the world he left behind could not offer. The undying lands are not called that, because mortals become immortal there. They are called that because the elves and the Valar do not die. Frodo remained mortal. His life, lengthened somewhat by the years he bore the ring, would still come to an end. Tolkien was explicit. The Valar neither possessed the power, nor the authority, to change the fate of men or hobbits. How long Frodo lived in Tol Eressëa, Tolkien never said. But before the end, there may have been one final reunion. In the year 61 of the Fourth Age, after the death of his wife Rose, Sam Gamgee is recorded as having traveled to the Grey Havens. Tolkien does not describe what followed, yet the implication is quietly clear. As a ring-bearer, even briefly, Sam too may have been granted passage west. If so, Frodo did not face his final years alone. There is a tendency to see Frodo's departure as a happy ending. Tolkien did not frame it that way. Frodo's journey west was not triumph, and it was not escape. He chose to leave. But he did so because remaining had become impossible. The Shire was saved, yet he could no longer live within it. Tolkien understood this well. He had seen war. He knew what it meant to return home, and discover that home no longer felt like a place of rest. The ring was not destroyed by Frodo's strength. It was destroyed despite his failure. Through Gollum and through the mercy Frodo had shown long before. That knowledge stayed with him. The undying lands offered healing. But healing is not restoration. Frodo would never be what he had been before the journey. The best he could hope for was understanding and the quiet ability to live with what remained. Tolkien once wrote that Frodo was sent west to heal him if that could be done before he died. There are wounds that do not fully close in this world. Some sacrifices cannot be undone, even in lands beyond the sea. Frodo sailed west, not because he had won, but because he had given more than he could ever recover. White shores, a green country, the sound of the sea, and silence.